The only thing that writers have is the power of hope, is that they create a new world, that where we can see a possibility. We can create another universe that where we think, yes, because it allows you to think differently. It brings in an image that you never have thought of and actually brings it closer to home, brings it closer to you.
I'm Fatima Bhutto, and in this series we'll be discussing one of the biggest stories of our time, the war in Gaza, and today, how Palestinian artists are responding to it. My guest this week is Gaza-born writer, director, and academic Ahmed Masoud. His work sets out to tell everyday stories from Palestine. He's written a detective story set in Gaza called Come What May, and a black comedy called The Shroud Maker. Having grown up in Jabalia refugee camp, Ahmed's siblings and family were trapped under Israel's siege. Ahmed, thank you so much for being here with us today. I know that as someone from Gaza, this must be an incredibly difficult time for you. There isn't a family in Gaza that hasn't suffered personally, that hasn't lost loved ones, and your family is no different. Can I ask you about your brother, Khalid?
Sure. So my brother was killed on the 22nd of January earlier this year. He was shot by what we call a quadcopter. A quadcopter is this new Israeli machine, which is a mixture between a drone and a helicopter that we think is run by AI and makes decisions by shooting directly. He was walking down the street going to get bread for his family. He was shot and the tanks advanced, so he was left bleeding on the street for 3 days. After 3 days of intensive bombing and shooting in the area, nobody could get there. Eventually, his kids and my cousins went to get him, and he was still alive, and he died on the way to, as they moved him on a donkey cart to get him to hospital. So had there been an ambulance, had there been a paramedic, he probably would have lived, but unfortunately there wasn't.
I'm so sorry to hear this, and also you had lived in Gaza for all your life until you came to London. And there must have been other times when you were separated from your family because of war, because of conflict. But this time seems so much more devastating. How are you coping?
I don't know is the right answer. I don't know how I'm coping, to be honest with you. I feel I need to stay strong for my family, and because people need me there right now in every aspect, whether it is through emotional support or financial support or through simply connecting them with each other, keeping the news flowing between members of the family. So I see this is my role at the moment, and that's how I'm coping. But also, I think the other thing is writing, really. I think writing has been an amazing thing for me in terms of coping. It's become very therapeutic and allowed me to process those emotions that are being literally squeezed and wringed inside me to come out in the form of a poem or a short story or a thought or a play, because with art you're able to drain those emotions a little bit and come out with something a little bit beautiful and kind of look at it and see those emotions without the wounds that come with it.
You've said before, our art is resistance and our resistance is art. And you are obviously a novelist, you have many hats as a writer, but over this past year, your Twitter account has performed as a kind of auxiliary news service. In a way, you're using it as a diary, so it's very diaristic. But you're also letting us, while you talk about your sister, about your nieces and nephews, your family, you're also telling us of the ongoing horrors of the constant Israeli bombardment. And at the same time, as you just mentioned, you started to write poetry, which is not something you'd done before last year. So has your life as a writer changed considerably? I mean, in ways that you hadn't quite imagined over this past year?
Completely. I mean, it changed in the way that I can't sleep, so most of my poetry and writing is coming out of lack of sleep, and there's a lot of thoughts and sort of subconscious thoughts, I suppose, and surreal thoughts sometimes. I write at night, late at night, and then wake up in the morning and look at what I've written, etc. I've never done that before. The fact that I write poetry now, I love poetry so much, it's amazing, but I was never able to write poetry before, and somehow it came out. It came out with the first poem that I wrote to my brother because I needed to say something, but I couldn't put it into a play or a plot or a climax or a twist and turn. There is no twist and turn. It's quite clear. It's a genocide. So how do you express that? How do you actually talk about a genocide and your emotions, seeing not just your family suffer, but also the place that you love, the place you grew up in, unrecognizable. And I can't recognize Gaza at the moment. How do I really talk about it, and how do I see it right now? I'm a writer that made a conscious decision to write about Gaza. I made that decision a long time ago because I wanted to. And now seeing that city being destroyed is hurting me so much, and I would love to write more about the city that it was and the city that it will be, rather than the city that it is right now that everybody is showing on the news.
Can you describe for us that city that it was? Because the rest of us, as maybe some people knew things of Gaza, but over the last year, we've just seen images of devastation, of destruction, and we've lost sight of what it was before. Can you tell us about that city that you remember?
Beautiful chaos, somehow. You know, think of Napoli, very much so. When I went to Napoli for the first time, I was like, that's it, I've arrived to my Gaza. This is the European version of Gaza.
A Mediterranean...
You know, a Mediterranean town with its little alleys, its old town, its market, its noise and hustle and bustle and cafes and restaurants and theaters and art venues and shops and people who smile a lot and make a lot of jokes and eat a lot of chili. So that's what Gaza was, and it's the Gaza I remember. But I do remember the first time I went from Jabalia camp, which is very different. When I was growing up, it was quite oppressive. There was no infrastructure. There was no sewage system, for example, in there, to go to Gaza City. And I saw these places of, you know, the Omari Mosque that was built in the 6th century or so, which is now destroyed, and unfortunately. El Pasha Palace, it's an Ottoman beautiful building. And I walked through the little alleys. I was like a little child looking at this beautiful city. So think of Damascus from that perspective, and Jerusalem and all of those places.
I want to come back to your childhood, but you mentioned the great Omari Mosque, which has been destroyed. There's also the Church of Saint Porphyrius, which is thought to be the third oldest church in the world that has been destroyed by Israeli bombardment. How does one fight to keep that cultural heritage? Because Gaza was known as a cultural hub for Palestinians and Arabs as well. How do you fight to keep that alive?
Through writing mostly, and I think literature is a footprint. The thing that will survive in the future, 200 or 300 years from now on, it will be a poem or a novel or a work of art that's sort of represented that. And I think we have a responsibility as Palestinians and as artists, but also as international solidarity, to kind of keep that alive as much as possible. I don't think many people now talk about the Omari Mosque or the church. I think that's been forgotten already. It pains me. And the reason it pains me is also because it is in my novel, Come What May, because a lot of the events are set in there, in the arches of the mosque and underneath in the tunnels, etc. And it's gone, and people don't know about it. So I think we have a responsibility as writers and as artists, but also as an international solidarity movement, to continue to talk about that, and to also later on hold Israel as responsible, because they are destroying a UNESCO World Heritage Site, you know, and that is an international crime. So making sure that we talk about it in social media, if we find a way of making films, art, or whatever it is, I think we should.
And reading. I mean, we have responsibilities as readers as well.
Readers, exactly.
And you mentioned that you grew up in Jabalia refugee camp. And I want to ask you how it was that literature found you, or you found literature. What did stories mean to you as a young boy?
I mean, I grew up as a refugee. lived with stories from my father, my grandfather, my grandmother about this beautiful house that we had in what is now Israel. That my grandfather was rich. He had this beautiful, again, Ottoman house built from a Jerusalem stone, that I sort of lived with those stories. In the meantime, I'm listening to all of this and that imagination and that world, that parallel universe that I'm told about. And what I go through on a daily basis is a UN refugee card that I have to go every Wednesday to collect the aids for my family, which consisted from some pita bread and corned beef, right? So I wanted to know a little bit more about that, about the literature and about the kind of the stories that people were living through. My father studied Arabic literature, and he was so much into books, and our house didn't have much food, but a lot of books, you know. So at the age of 9, I read Lenin,
oh my
because
goodness.
my dad was on the left side, you know. I read, by the age of 10, I read all of Ghassan Kanafani's work, the Palestinian novelist. He was killed in 1972 for his writing. We had about 4 volumes of Mahmoud Darwish books that my dad used just to go to the market. We didn't get food, he would get secondhand books and stack them up. So that's how literature on books found me.
You know, you mentioned the genocide as something that is constantly changing, something that's, you can't go to sleep and wake up in the morning without finding new devastation and new horrors. And certainly no one has escaped this in Gaza. But there has also been, and I'm not talking about journalists here, there has also been a concerted effort to kill writers, to kill poets, to kill translators. And I want to ask you, what is it about writers that is so dangerous? And what power do writers have, if any, against this kind of erasure?
I think the only thing that writers have is the power of hope, is that they create a new world where we can see a possibility. We can create another universe where we think, yes, because it allows you to think differently. It brings in an image that you never have thought of, and actually brings it closer to home, brings it closer to you. I don't think a poem has changed the world or changed politics or governments, etc. But it made a huge difference to that.
But hope is a huge power.
And hope makes a huge difference. Hope is a huge power. So writers have no actual physical power. They're not fighters. They're not, you know, going on the front line and doing it, but they are risking a lot of their lives. Many writers have received death threats in Gaza by the Israeli army before they were killed and targeted, because they know that there is that possibility that we will change people's hearts and minds.
You mentioned Mahmoud Darwish earlier, and he's one of my favorite poets. He said, "We do what prisoners do, we cultivate hope." So what is your hope for the future, Ahmed?
My hope for the future, I think, is that for the whole thing to be resolved as much as possible. I am a big believer of a one-state solution. That's what I advocate for. I think it can happen, it will happen. But also, the hope is that us Palestinians are seen as normal people, as normal humans, and we're taken seriously, not just by our enemies or people who don't like us, but also by our friends as well. That we're seen as writers, as doctors, as engineers, as academics, as normal people. We have the good and the bad, the heroes and the villains, and all of these things. We're not some sort of extraterrestrial people who are just like terrorists or really victims or whatever it is. We're a complete society in there, and people need to understand that. And the way to do it is to read more of our work, read our poetry, read our books, connect with us as much as possible. Even right now, on social media, people from Gaza are writing some really honest sort of accounts, you know, not just criticizing Israel and the West and all of these things. They're not just angry about that, they're also angry about the tradesmen who are charging high interest with, you know, money transfer and goods, and they're writing all of that, they're recording all of that. And I think it's our responsibility to be in touch with that as much as possible and to see people as humans as possible.
I'm going to turn to the audience now for some questions for Ahmed. We've got a question in the front.
Hi everyone, my name is Azad Hashim Sharma. I'm a writer and I'm the director of an independent publisher called the 87 Press. We've recently worked closely with PACB to release a statement in support of BDS. My question is, we have seen across the world a lot of writers, cultural institutions and artists standing up to support the Palestinian liberation. but I'd like to know what more we can do aside from boycott.
Thank you.
This is a really good question. I think that a lot of writers and artists have stood up to support the Palestinian cause and to denounce the genocide, the Israeli genocide, for sure. However, I don't think it's enough. I think there are a lot of many other writers who haven't yet. I don't have time for writers and artists who haven't stood up and said, "Hey, this is wrong. What are you doing?" or expressed an opinion about it, because those people influence and inspire a lot of other people as well. And I think we should be, as an international solidarity movement and publishers, not to engage with those people. And it's the time for naming and shaming and say, no, I'm sorry, I can't work with you, because that's the only way that's going to put pressure on them to change the direction in terms of saying, well, actually, wow, now my writing is being affected. Now I'm going to suffer personally because nobody's going to read my books, or publishers are not going to publish my work.
Ahmed, I don't know if you saw this. There was a counter letter published. Authors had signed on to boycott Israeli cultural festivals and things, was met with a counter-protest letter. And in that letter, people defending Israel said that it was dangerous and illiberal to boycott cultural institutions. What's your response to that?
I mean, this is the classic kind of argument that boycott is dangerous because you need to engage with the other side, and it's better to have that conversation rather than not have that conversation. There is an argument there that I'm happy to debate and happy to delve and dive deep into. However, at this time, when there is genocide, for anybody who is complicit and who is supportive of this genocide, then no, I don't think there is a moment of dialogue and kind of having that relationship and that connection with Israeli cultural institutions, for example. If we think about Israeli theaters, most of them are state-funded. Most of them have kind of a relationship with the government of some sort. And most of them end up performing in illegal settlements in the West Bank. So there's a big case for boycott. There's a big case for saying, well, actually, that doesn't sit well with my morality and my principles.
Other questions? The lady in the front.
Hi, my name's Ruth Lass. I'm an actor. I'm also part of cultural organisations as Theatre, White Kite Collective, who stand with and for in solidarity of Palestinians. And I'm also helping to set up a Jewish artist network for Palestine. Ahmed, we've seen the intensification of the erasure of Palestinian stories and a chilling and cowardly silence and censorship from cultural organisations. Firstly, do you feel that the arts sector has failed Palestinians? And can you also talk about the role of resistance in arts, particularly from grassroots organisations? You know, is the third intifada going to be a cultural one?
I think the arts sector in the UK and in many other countries has failed Palestinians a long time ago, and not just now, by the way. I think institutions have disengaged with Palestine about sort of maybe 8 years ago or so, particularly when Corbyn came to power and became the leader of the opposition. That was actually a defining moment for Palestinian artists for us. And I'll give you my experience and an example. I had scheduled plays to be in certain venues, and when that sort of the height of the anti-Semitism debate of the Labour Party and the issue around the Labour Party and Jeremy Corbyn, which has nothing to do with my piece of art and my creation, my play was cancelled for no reason, you know, from various venues, because people started to see us as like, oh, if I put a Palestinian play or story or whatever it is, then I'm taking sides and I'm being anti-Semitic. There was no chance for us to kind of break through this, and many cultural organizations opted to have, you know, works about Palestine written by non-Palestinians. I want to get back to the point around the next intifada. Is it cultural intifada? I think yes, and it's happening already. I think, you know, Palestine in the last 10, 15 years, if you look at the cultural production there in terms of theatre, cinema, we have more cinema coming out of Palestine than Syria and Lebanon combined. in terms of films, which is incredible, right? Theatre, there are so many theatre companies in the West Bank and in Gaza as well. I think now we need to rebuild that and need to make sure to focus on that as much as possible so that doesn't get killed, because a lot of artists are killed already. But the idea and the importance of it and the resonance of it doesn't go away. I think we need to continue to imagine as much as possible, support Palestinian artists. So yes, cultural intifada, it's happening already. How is it going to peak? I don't know yet.
Gentleman in the back, yeah.
Hi, my name is Simeon. I live in London. I'm currently a teacher in training and a rapper. So as someone who enjoys writing, I'm an advocate about how words can help make sense of emotions. And after seeing all this senseless carnage taking place, what's one piece of writing that you wrote that has helped you cope with all the senseless carnage that's been taking place?
That's a really good question. I mean, a piece of writing that helped me cope. Well, I think two pieces of writing, I guess, or three, if I may. One is the poem to my brother. I think it made me process everything like in there and remember him as beautiful as he was. The second one, I wrote a poem called To Gaza with Hope, and in it I just talked to Gaza city as the city with buildings and things like that, and I really I like that poem because it's almost a pledge for me, and I read it quite a lot to remind myself that I will remember Gaza as a beautiful place, not as a destroyed place. And the third piece is actually a 5-minute play called The Florist of Rafah. And it's about it's a true story. I saw this guy in Rafah in a refugee camp selling flowers. And I thought, my God, what made you think this is what people need right now? You have no food, you have no basic stuff. But you go home to the tent to your partner, to your kids and say, I've got you a flower. And the great thing about it was that people were buying. People, buying extremely expensive flowers. Where did they come from? How much did he risk his life for? And there's those beauties of people that change a lot about what you see with there. So with your work, I would advise, if you're writing about Palestine, is look for these things more than you look for, the massacre with 20 people. The news covers the stories, covers the numbers, covers the bodies, covers the atrocities of it. But for you, is that how do I get that emotion in there? Because I have that power and that weapon of words and imagery and metaphors and beautiful things. How can I do it? And I want to say this actually because you're an artist. You also have a responsibility with this to help us with Palestinians. It's not just us Palestinian writers writing about the genocide. I think everyone should write about it and how you feel about it, because it is affecting you as much as affecting me. It's damaging you as much as it's damaging all of us.
Ahmed, I wonder if you would read for us the poem to your brother Khalid.
Sure. I should say that this poem I only read once in public. It does make me quite emotional, so if I stop halfway through, apologies. So this poem is called To Khalid. Khalid is my older brother, killed on the 22nd of January 2024. To Khalid. Eternal is your name in Arabic, so stay immortal. Beyond the borderlines of this world, beyond the pain, beyond what you have seen in Gaza, beyond your child's screams of hunger and fear, you will be in a smokeless, bombless place. So wait for me, brother. Be patient and don't leave. You're only allowed to leave once. When I get there, I don't want to see you sad or old, angry or tired, scared of bombs or big tanks, frustrated or worried. Just stay as you were. Two excited lads wanting to play the oud and cycle to the beach. I will practice playing new songs and I will show off. In the meantime, while you wait, you can find someone to teach them how to sand wood, to make beautiful furniture, or teach the kids how to play marbles brilliantly. You can keep your big smile as you busy yourself doing things for others, like you have always done. Whatever you do, just stay there. I'm coming. I won't be long. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ahmed. That's such a beautiful and moving tribute. Thank you for sharing it with us. And thank you for being on Reframe today. It's been a privilege to speak to you. And thank you to all of you for joining us for this important conversation.